the the Congress, that was my first introduction. And then when I was a freshman, they took us on a field trip, and we went down. And guess which class we watched during that field trip? Freestyle reining. And I sat there watching the freestyle reining. And mind you, again, I'm a freshman. I'm this early on, and I'm like, someday I'm going to do that.
You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to The Ride, a bi-weekly podcast brought to you by Horse and Rider Magazine, co-hosted by Nichole, Chirico, and Devin, Conley. In each episode, we chat with some of the industry's top trainers, clinicians, horsekeeping experts, and professionals to share inspiring stories, training philosophies, and the importance of living your best Western horse life.
On this episode of The Ride podcast, Nichole and Devin chat with acclaimed trainer Stacy Westfall. An international speaker, professional coach, and a sought-after endorser, Stacy has made a name for herself in and out of the arena. We all remember her iconic bareback and bridleless freestyle reining run from 2006, and to this day, Stacy makes her mark in the show pen, on the trail, and in the lives of horse owners around the world. This episode is brought to you by Cosequin Joint Health Supplement. When performance matters, choose Cosequin.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Ride podcast. I'm Devin. I'm here with my co-host Nichole, and we are joined today with a special guest, and that is Stacy Westfall. Stacy Westfall is an international speaker. She's a professional coach. She's a horsewoman who has a long and wonderful reputation in the horse industry. She's worked with a variety of people on horses from a vast number of environments. She's well known for her bareback freestyle championships and also just her ability to connect with horses and clients of all backgrounds. She's a very well-respected figure in the horse industry, and we are so excited to have her here today. So Stacy, thank you for joining us. Welcome. Can you just kind of give us a little brief background on yourself, a little introduction?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. And I was looking through, I was thinking, what do I say? And I look like a jack of all trades, I think, when I look at my resume, because it goes like bareback, bridleless, freestyle reining, colt starting champion, mounted shooting, traditional dressage, Western dressage. What is happening over here? What is this woman doing? And the answer to that question...
Yeah, you are a jack of all trades.
Yeah, and the answer to that question is I'm chasing that childhood feeling of wanting to do it all with horses. Like, what do you want to do with horses? I want to own one of every breed, and I want to do everything. And some of those things get reined in a little bit more as you start realizing all of the implications of that actual thing. Like, I don't know if I could own that many breeds, because I realized that I love developing a deep relationship with the horses. And so that becomes more important than the number, is the depth of the relationship for me. So it ends up a smaller number does that. But the vast playground of events to play around with, not to mention, I left out trail riding, and I literally live in my location due to being behind a state park for trail riding. So yeah, I'm still a little girl who wants to do everything I can with horses.
I think that's great. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have when you're talking about, you know, you went from doing your freestyle reining stuff to your colt starting to the Western dressage, traditional dressage, even trail riding, is that all that stuff, the one thing they have in common is that it really takes a connection with the horse and having a great fundamentals, a background, teaching these horses. And that to me is what you are doing. So yes, it might be a jack of all trades, but at the end of the day, it still ties into the fact that you take the time to really introduce fundamentals to a horse and make sure that they are, you know, ready to do their job, whether it is hitting a trail ride or going into the, you know, Congress for bridleless bareback. You know, all those horses have that in common, regardless of the discipline or the breed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And when I imagine it, so many times people look at the industry and then they start breaking it apart and they start going, well, is it going to be English or is it going to be Western? Is it going to be this or is it going to be that? And in my mind, it's a tree trunk with branches. But that trunk is so much more. Like that foundation you just spoke of goes higher. So the exploration I've done is like most recently has all been focused with one horse, because the question I ask myself is, okay, what would happen if I take this one horse and I teach her multiple disciplines? Because now we don't have to say, well, Stacy can ride that horse in dressage and Stacy can ride that horse in reining. No, what happens if Willow does all of these things with me? Because what happens is I start to be able to see that through thread that's true, the true foundation that overlaps across all of the disciplines. And that's what fascinates me to no end.
And yeah, I'm excited for this interview. I just feel like so many different listeners are going to be able to identify with what you say, no matter what discipline they're from. And so I love your outlook on, like, at the end of the day, it's for the love of the horse, the connection of the horse, and what can we do with one horse. That's really cool. Did you start off that way in the horse industry? Like, were you a youth competitor? Did you have a focus when you were younger that you really wanted to hone in on, or have you always kind of had this mindset?
No, I grew up in Maine, very far east, very far north. And so growing up in Maine, when I did, you have to remember, it's even hard for me to realize that it was pre-internet. And so my only real exposure outside of the pony that I got when I was 6, and then a few years later, my mom got her first horse. We had the horses, and there was one little tiny local show, and we had to ride our horses several miles to get there because we didn't have a truck and trailer. And so did not have the exposure. I literally only saw the Kentucky Derby and the Olympics. That was my only idea that horses could be any sort of a thing outside of like the people that I knew that owned them. And so it was definitely very far away from growing up with it. I mean, I've teased my mom before and been like, what were you thinking when we did that? And she was like, we didn't know. I didn't know. And obviously you were 8 years old. You didn't know. Like, I can remember the craziest things that we did because we just didn't know. And we were basically learning together, reading books, magazines, going, well, I don't know, something's not working. That's all we have for clarity today. And so it wasn't until I was a junior in high school. And by then I was showing in a barrel racing club, and I would go clean people's houses to be able to put my horse in their trailer to be able to get hauled to the show. So still, like, saved my money, and the first thing I bought was a 2-horse trailer. And so the idea that it was anything beyond that was incomprehensible. But in a math class one day, a teacher, it was my math teacher, had about an extra 15 minutes at the end of math class one day. And he starts going row by row through the class. And I'm over in the last row, happened to be from the side he started on. And he's asking, what are you going to do after you graduate? What are you going to do? And he comes around to me, junior in high school. What are you going to do? I don't know, go to school for accounting or something. I'm in a math class. This seems like a good answer. And I kind of roll my eyes as I say it. And he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to ride horses, but you can't go to school for that. And he says, get up right now, go upstairs to the guidance counselor's office, because that's where they keep all of the books on the colleges. Because remember, pre-internet, he's like, go look through those books until you find a college that has equine. And I was like, oh, crazy person, but I'll go do it. And I was shocked. Like, the University of Findlay in Ohio and Texas A&M, there were much closer, like in Connecticut, and I was like, what is happening? Life-changing right there.
That's crazy. Okay, so you figure out that there is, a way to get a further education in equine sciences and horse training. What was it that kind of finalized it for you, where you were just like, this is my career path. This is how I'm going to go to school. This is what I'm going to do.
Oh, it literally happened that moment in the guidance counselor's office. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. Like, and I love how you generously said further your education. You have to keep in mind, I'd gotten into barrel racing because my mom and I could figure out the rules of that one, go fast and don't knock things down. Whenever we went to other local shows, which back in the day, you could go to an open show and you could pay like one flat fee. And I was a kid. I don't even remember how much it was. And we would literally we would pull our jeans over our breeches and we would change classes and go on every single thing we were eligible for. And we had no idea like why we would place or why we wouldn't. The only thing that we could figure out was barrel racing, speed events, because, fast and don't knock things down. So then I had gone into that. So when you say continue my education, I had been run away with coming out of the end of the chute and I couldn't stop. And you have to picture, I come past the laser timer, out through a chute, and then I cross a parking lot and hit a car because I can't stop. So when I say hit the car, it was a parked car, by the way. And when I say hit it, technically her front feet kind of slid underneath it and she arched her neck over it. And I'm laying on her neck going like, well, that's not right. But back in the day, all people said was, you just need a bigger bit. Nobody is looking at like, what's causing this? Nobody's asking the questions of like, why did this not stop? What's going on? Can anything else be done? It's just get a bigger bit. And so the minute that I saw that open, it puts you kind of, I can remember literally like that shocky kind of a feeling because it was such a turn. But it was like because you have to remember, it wasn't, I can go to school for it. It was, a world exists somewhere out there big enough that you can go to school for that. Like it was way bigger than you can go to school for that. It indicated that there must be an industry somewhere out there that I'm not seeing outside of the magazine, the Olympics, and the Kentucky Derby, which I cried when I passed the average height and weight of a jockey. I cried. Like, I was like, my career has just ended and I'm in like the 5th grade.
It didn't even start and we're already at the end of it. So technically, I guess start your education is a better way of, phrasing it. What was your first experience getting into that actual world and seeing it in person, and not just on the television or in magazines? What was that like?
Yeah. 2 things that, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. 2 things that are going to stand out to me. Number 1, I'm so glad they didn't judge me on my skill set. I knew horses had leads. And if I was on the ground and somebody was lunging or riding one, I could probably see the front lead, but I was a little bit fuzzy on whether or not there was like that hind lead. I definitely couldn't just see it. So going into it, I had a lot of miles under my seat, and I was told that. And I also was told that at least my hands were quiet. They didn't do anything, but I hadn't been accidentally trained to do a lot of weird things. I just was like able to sit on things because I'd ridden a lot of not well-trained horses and stayed on top a lot. And so I'm so glad that I wasn't judged by my ability or not to do that it was more my willingness to apply myself. And now, I would not have known this back then, but what I know now is that when you get a chance to learn something in such an intense amount of time as what I did there, it actually changes the way that you learn. So to go from not knowing my leads and within a 4-year time span, be able to do everything that I could to be able, like I showed in my first NRHA show when I was a senior. And so to be able to go that fast through all of it, it's actually, it's, you can look at the neuroscience of it, but your brain galloping through all of that information that fast wires it together. And it's one of the reasons I love teaching so much is because I learned it all in that container so fast that I can easily remember not knowing it.
Well, and what an origin story. This is just such a neat story because to go from like, I didn't even know there was a whole industry here to now being cemented as like, you're an icon in the industry in so many arenas, pun intended, with the horse industry, like what an incredible trajectory. Was there, as you started out, because you serve as an inspiration for a lot of people now, and I know that you've helped a lot of people with their horsemanship, and you're just somebody that a lot of riders look up to. Was there anybody like that for you as you started out, as you really started learning, continuing, starting your education, that really stands out in your mind as like, this person was a mentor. They were a role model for me?
It's interesting because when I look at that one, I believe like a lot of I believe it's possible to have lots of different mentors. And so early on, easily would have been my mom. My mom was so compassionate, but she was also, even though we struggled with safety things, I can remember one particular time that I had my pony, I'm riding her bareback. My mom set up a jump. To keep this in perspective, we're talking about two, depending on where you live, soda cans, pop cans, two pop cans with a stick across it. This is my jump. I'm jumping my pony. And my pony's going up to it and then like stopping at the last second, putting her head down and eating, which is like super inconvenient if you're little and bareback because you tend to slide down their neck. But my mom was more like, she would be like, why do you think the pony's doing that? And I'm crying. She hates me. She hates me. Like, I don't, like coming up with all these different things like that. And she's coaching me to like, do it again. And as soon as I do it once, I can quit and I can even get rid of the pony if that's what I was throwing for whatever like breakdown I was having. And then, but in the middle of it, she'd also be like, why do you think she's doing that? And we would let our horses just free roamed. She'd be like, where is my horse? Are you headed towards the barn? Does she want to eat? Like all, and so she was introducing the idea of looking all these ways. So my mom served as an amazing first mentor. And then when I went to college, I had an unbelievable ability to like, so Dan Huss, which listeners either know from the reining, or if they don't recognize him from the reining, a few years ago, his bridle broke and the video of him finishing the ride as his bridle fell off went viral. That's Dan Huss. And he was my instructor. And while I was going to school, I had Clark Bradley. So I've got all these people that were Hall of Famers and very skilled showmen, and they're my instructors. And then I went to work for Dan. So I think that it's almost like a ladder of these mentors. And that also includes a ton of like books and nowadays podcasts and just continual learning. So I think the dance of it is staying on the path, realizing the different things you need and finding a way to fill that gap.
You mentioned Clark Bradley, who is obviously a very legendary part of NRHA. So that makes sense as to how you got involved in the reining industry. And like you said, Dan is now a big part of the reining industry. At the time, he was doing a lot of the all-around stuff, the Western Pleasure, the horsemanship. We're big fans of Dan and Wendy at this magazine. We love learning from them, and they have been great to work with. But it makes sense how you ended up in the reining industry with, working with these people. And I have to talk about your freestyle runs because I was at the Quarter Horse Congress watching you when I was 17. And now I'm sure my 17-year-old self would be like, oh my gosh, you're talking to Stacy Westfall, who just won this amazing event with her horse bridleless bareback in a wedding dress. So you obviously got involved in the freestyle and you were very, very popular in it. You even ended up on the Ellen DeGeneres show. How did that go about?
It's funny because Congress for me has several key moments. That would be a lot to unpack. But like the first key moment that Congress has for me is when I heard that you could go to school for horses. I selected the University of Findlay probably as my number one choice over Texas A&M. Location, specialty, size of the town, all of these mattered. I come from a town with no stoplights, like one flashing yellow light. And so my mom and I flew. And to give you an idea, when my mom and I flew out to see it when I was a senior, it was the first time I had ever flown. It was the first time my mom had ever flown. And we came out to Ohio. Well, I had looked up an alumni from Findlay And she was like, I'm going to be in Ohio the same time that you are. I'm going to be at this horse show. And we're like, what are the chances of that? We'll have to drive down and look at that horse, find you at the horse show. So we went to Findlay, saw it, drove to this horse show, walked in. I'm not kidding you. If you've ever been there, we spent well over an hour trying to find her because it's the Quarter Horse Congress is this little horse show that we went into. And if you've ever been to the Congress, the pen that they show, not the freestyle, but the main arena for the reining is in the Celeste Center, not the Coliseum. And when you walk into the Celeste, the wall's really high, so you can't see what's going on in there. So I'm a senior. I literally had no idea the Quarter Horse Congress was a thing. I've just had my mind blown by the University of Findlay. And I walk in, and as I'm walking in, we can hear the classic reining cheering going on. And my mind is like, what is it? It's not barrel racing. Well, I'm pretty sure it's not Western Pleasure. Like my mind is going through like the limited things that I had known, and I couldn't come up with anything. And walked up in the stands and turned, because you have to go up into the stands to look. I turned around and I looked and I saw a horse spinning. It was another one of those like mind blown moments. And that was before I'd even gone to Findlay yet. I was a senior in high school still, but just turned around and was like, I don't know what that is, but that's amazing. So the Congress, that was my first introduction. And then when I was a freshman, they took us on a field trip and we went down, and guess which class we watched during that field trip? Freestyle reining. And I sat there watching the freestyle reining. And mind you, again, I'm a freshman. I'm this early on. And I'm like, someday I'm going to do that.
I mean, it's one of the most iconic classes at the Quarter Horse Congress. It's one of the few ticketed events, and it's always a sold out crowd. And to this day, it's a really big deal. And I think it also helped kind of, get other parts of the country really hyped up for the freestyle reining, because, Ohio is the birthplace of reining. So a lot of major events have started in Ohio, and they've extended out to other parts. But I mean, even I was at the Denver stock show the other day, and the freestyle out here sold out crowd. And it was mostly people who don't ride or own horses or show in our industry. And they just think it's really cool. So I could see how, even though you had a passion for horses, you were still very new to the horse show industry and training and riding in that sense. But I would also probably get really hooked on that and want to do that as well if that was like my first real experience at a horse show, because it's just so cool and the environment is electric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it has been a great introduction for a lot of people into the sport, into the industry. And it's still amazing to me. I will meet riders that are so skilled now, and they'll say, I saw your video and it made me want to give it a try. And then I look at them and I'm like, wow, like, you've done a lot with that. So it's pretty amazing.
Oh yeah, that iconic video. I mean, I remember watching that too. And like my dad showed it to me, and I grew up in rodeo, and I remember so clearly how he was like, look at this, display of horsemanship. This is so impressive. And I was like, man, I might try that on one of my rodeo horses. And then he's like, no, I don't think you should do that. But it was such an iconic video. So if we can fast forward a little bit, because I think people are probably really curious about what came after that and where are you now? I know that you do a lot of coaching and you do a lot of traveling and talking and kind of even giving like clinics and things of that nature. And you've traveled internationally and done this as well. So what's going on now? Let's fast forward a little bit.
Yeah. Fast forward, and it's been quite the roller coaster. Lots of stuff has happened. But if we want to jump into the more present right now, then I would say that as far as like, I sometimes in my brain, I still separate it like business versus like pleasure, which it actually gets super fuzzy because my pleasure is horses and my business is horses. So it's very easy to run this together. But when I think about personally, a lot of the things that I do with my personal horses now, and ironically, even that bareback and bridleless, which started originally as the original bridleless ride in 2003 with Can Lena, those were all personal challenges. It was like I actually dropped a rein and got a zero, it's like the penalty zero, kind of zero for dropping my rein. And so it was this like disqualification type thing that led to me trying the bridleless. And every single one of these moments has been like, those have been more personal challenges that you guys happen to have seen. So in 2019, I actually challenged myself to learn traditional dressage. I wanted to do Western dressage, but I also wanted to know like the foundation of it, which seemed like it was traditional dressage. So I threw myself in to learning. And when I say threw myself in, there's times I look up and I go, oh my gosh, like that was exhausting. And then I go, well, I learned, started showing, and moved from first level. I moved 3 levels in 3 months and earned my bronze medal with My Little Pony in 3 months. It hurt. My brain, my body, everything. So, and that was with a self-trained like little reining trail horse that I like switched over and was going through learning. So my personal life is where I tend to do all of these experimenting and learning with horses. And then in my business life, it was interesting because in 2019, I was documenting this with something I called on YouTube Trail to the World Show. And I was documenting like, this is what it's like if you pivot and try to go do this. And so I was sharing all that as I was doing it. And I was creating online courses and ways that I could interact with people that way. And then 2020 hit. And 2020 hit, and I already had my online course. And I knew that there was a magic that happens when you have repeat exposure with the same people. So like if somebody can haul in and do lessons, then you can meet with them, you can interact with them, whether that's weekly or every other week. There's a regularity to it. And I could see that there was a huge difference between people that came in for a clinic once a year versus people that location-wise live closer and could come in. And I started trying to dissect that and figure out what it was. And a lot of it was not just techniques, because I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in like, it's like, oh, you see the rider and the horse. And so you see the body of the rider and the body of the horse, and they're doing this thing. Well, it's the mind of the rider and the mind of the horse that are actually interacting. And so when you're learning, you've got to learn the actual like nuts and bolts is what I call it. You've got to learn the nuts and bolts of the body control and communication like that. But there's so much of it that's a mindset, a way of being, a belief. There's so many other systems at play that are going on in the rider's mind that are influencing literally your experience of what the horse is doing. So I can have a horse that does something and I'm laughing at what the horse is offering me, and somebody else is freaking out because this must mean it's the end of the world. And we're looking at the same thing, obviously through different skill sets. So basically I became obsessed with how to teach really effectively online. And so I have 2 different programs that I do that with. And one is a group program that's like lifetime access. And the other one's a private one. And get this, like, I still can't believe this happened. I started coaching a woman who lived in Alaska. I'm in Ohio. I coached her the first year on how to safely be able to canter. At the end of that year, I said, if you could do anything, like just dream for a minute, what would you do? And she was like, I've always wanted to compete at a world show. And I was like, well, why don't you try going for that? And she's in her 60s and she's in Alaska. And I'm like, if you could do any of them, which one would you pick? And she's like, the Western Dressage World Show. That would be amazing. And the next year she came back. We did the one-on-one. Keep in mind, she doesn't have an indoor arena. She has an arena that's about a third the size of a traditional dressage arena, doesn't have a full-size dressage arena. And I never saw her and her horse one time live, coached her, and she ended up getting her horse down to Oklahoma and was reserve champion. That's crazy.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't get the unmute button to work. Sorry, Alex, you'll have to edit this out. My fiance edits our podcast, so he's used to my shenanigans. That is incredible. That's just a testament to what you are doing, and and how you're helping people, well, first of all, connect with their horses, but also the mental aspect of it is something that I feel like we don't talk about enough. I think we always talk about, oh, your horse is doing this, this, and this. Here's how you fix it. But there's also a person in that saddle, and you have to have that mental, aspect, connection, confidence. I mean, everything else to be able to apply that to the horse. Cause like you said, you might be laughing over one thing and somebody else is freaking out because it's the end of the world for them. And so I think that's a really unique way of approaching horse training and coaching. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that journey in general and how you've kind of changed your training programs to include more of that?
Yeah. So when I look at it, there's a couple concepts that sort of dance with each other. And so here they are. So one of my life goals is to be a lifetime learner, particularly with horses. So I want to be a lifetime learner, but particularly with horses. And so that sounds lovely. Most people would be like, yes, sign me up. Now take that, hold pause on that thought for a minute. And then you take riders in particular. And I say to you, Devin, Nichole, would you like to increase your awareness? Would you like to be more aware as a rider? You're nodding. Most people are like, yes, I want more awareness. I want awareness. I want to be a lifelong learner. Sign me up. Okay. So when you begin to increase your awareness, do you know what happens? You become aware of everything that's not working. You become aware of some good things, but you also become aware, equally in proportion, of the not so good things. So the minute your awareness starts to increase, you increase both the what's working and what's not working. But you know what stands out to you most? The what's not working. And so there's this dance of like, I would love to have more feel. I would love to have more awareness. You will feel more of both. You will be aware more of both. So then you take the idea of being a lifelong learner and you say, hey, Stacy Westfall is going to go sign up to do traditional dressage. That sounds lovely. Lifelong learning means becoming the learner's mind. It means walking in knowing you don't know. It means walking in. My first dressage show, I should actually go back and look at it. I think I broke 3 major rules at one show. Like it was like how many rules can Stacy break without even knowing it? So I go in and I come out and they say, we need to check your bit. You know what a reiner does when they say, we need to check your bit? We pull the bridle off the horse. Like, there it is. And so I'm standing there and I whip the bridle off my horse and then they're all like, whoa, what's going on? And I'm like, what's happening? They're like, put the bridle back on. I'm like, okay, I'll put the bridle back on. And they're like, we have rubber gloves. We stick our fingers in the mouth. We check. We don't take the bridles off the horse unless they're in a stall. And I was like, okay. That little, whatever you want to call it, my book, it's a mistake. Could it be embarrassing? Yes. Was it something? Yes. Am I used to being uncomfortable? Yes. So I'm like, well, chalk one up. I'll remember. They check bits. Interestingly, with the bridle still on. And then I go in, this literally, terminology is like the killer between the two different things. I go in, I go off, is it pattern? Is it test? I go off pattern. I'm a reiner at heart. So I go off pattern. I'm like, seriously, what do you guys call it? Like off test? That doesn't make sense. Like, I don't know. So I go off pattern. They ring the little bell. My heart stops. And then I go, oh, well, look, you can live through the little bell. I'm like, that's kind of cool. They just ring a little bell and then they tell you where to go back to. And so the judges, I'm like 3/4 of the way down the arena away from the judge. Judge like waves her hands like to tell me where I knew this, that she just tell me where to go. So I turn around, I lope off to go down to her, which then gets me in trouble because you're not supposed to do that. Like, walk. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I've got to remember the test that I've memorized from the part after being interrupted. I'm literally breaking rules as fast as they can happen. That is the fastest way to learn if you're a lifelong learner. If you can tolerate, and I'm not saying I'm breaking them on purpose, but if you can tolerate the discomfort of going, you know what's going to help me get started here is to go to the show and learn what I don't know. And what I don't know is going to be a mistake. So the dance between being the lifelong learner and increasing your feel and awareness in the group work that I do with people or the one-on-one, what I get to do when I interact with people every single week, I have a meeting this afternoon with my group. I get to talk to them and say like, hey, that's normal. I get to talk to them and say, that's just another one of the mistakes people make. I can also say, this thing you're doing right here, if you continue down this track, your horse is probably going to start doing this, and that's not going to go so well. So I can help them to start to see that through thread. So I'm normalizing why the horse is doing the thing the horse is doing. And I'm normalizing why they feel so uncomfortable or whatever else it is that's happening for them during that experience of learning and increasing their awareness.
I just have to laugh really quick because my friend is a cow horse rider and she recently got into dressage. She ended up with a warm blood that needed some help, and the old owner wasn't comfortable, so they gave him to her, and she went to her first dressage show, and the whistle was blown because she went off course, off test, and she just left the arena. She was like, "Oh, one off pattern, I'm out." And they were like, "What are you doing?"
Yes.
So I'll be sure to let her know. I was like, "Hey, even Stacy Westfall was like trying to figure out the differences between the Western world and the English world."
Oh yes. I dismounted inside the arena at one show, because we do that in reining all the time. That's also not allowed. Like, I've got a whole list of like things that are not allowed, and I've learned them all through personal experience.
And I mean, I have definitely been there. Like I said, I grew up in rodeo, and then I started showing ranch horses. And at my first like ranch horse show, even just the warm up arena is so, like, the etiquette of the warm up arena is so different. And I had to learn the hard way. I was like, okay, there's some differences here, and these are good differences, or they're, different, whatever. They're just different. So I like that philosophy, and go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Like what you were just saying, that I remember that was in one of my videos. I'm standing outside the dressage arena doing like the selfie view, talking to the camera, and I was like, I literally am afraid to go in the warm-up arena because it's a dressage show and it doesn't look anything at all like a reining show warming up. And there's people getting ready for all these different levels, and I'm standing outside there. And I'm like, I know I need to go in and warm up, and I don't want to. And I looked around for somebody who was coaching a lot of people, and I walked straight up and I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm new. You look like you have a lot of riders. Please tell me how to stay out of their way. and she told me how to stay out of their way. But what this reminds me of, as you both share those things, is I listened to the podcast that both of you did on your horses, like, well, the soundness issue with the one and the colic surgery with the other. And one of the things that's just so needed in the industry is just this normalization of the struggle, whether it's the health struggle, whether it's the like, I'm about to walk into the warm-up arena and I don't want to be a problem. But there's a good chance I don't know how not to be a problem. And so all of this is the important stuff that you want to be steeped in. And if you're lucky enough to be in a barn where you can regularly get that contact, then it will accidentally seep into you. And the hole I wanted to fill was for the people who didn't have that right around them and didn't have that ability to be in that barn, being steeped in that every single week. So thank you guys for sharing your struggles. Like, please do a follow-up on them, because now I want to know how the horses are doing.
Mine is 2 colic surgeries and 70% of her colon missing later. She's alive and well, and will hopefully make it as a reiner one of these days if she'll stay healthy.
Good.
But and then Devin's is also doing well. He's back on track. Oh, ish, maybe. Depends on the day.
Mystery continues.
Horses are so much fun. But yeah, no, like, kind of to your point, my editor columns when I'm writing for the magazine are always about, trying new things. I came from the all around world. I was in that world for 20 years. And then I got this job and I got to go to a cow horse show. And I was like, oh, they do this. Like, I thought like I had an adrenaline rush running around in the showmanship, which don't get me wrong. I loved the showmanship when I did it. And it was a big part of my career. And I'm thankful for it because I think it made me the rider I am today. But now I'm like, there was this whole new industry and it hooked me. And I was just like, screw it. I'm going to go learn how to do this. And I didn't know anybody in this industry and I don't know how to do it. And so I've always trying to write about that and just tell people like, I'm a non-pro. I keep my horse at a boarding barn. I do it myself. I call trainers. I go to their house when I can. And I just tell them my stories because we're all just in this together trying to make our way through the industry. And so if I can be the writing support that helps somebody, do something that they're afraid to do, then that's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, Devin, go ahead.
Let me make a note. I make notes of edits for Alex. That should be easy for her, right?
You're so much nicer than I am.
I need to edit this. That's so funny. I think it's really important for people to hear that even if you're a lifelong rider, you've been in the saddle your whole life, you've grown up in the industry, we're all going to struggle. And especially when we try something new, like you are not expected to know everything. And that's, like you said, like that is the goal of being a lifelong learner, is admitting, or a key to being a lifelong learner is admitting that there's so much you don't know. That's one of my life philosophies, is that the only thing I know is that I know nothing. Mm-hmm. So I'll chalk that one up to Plato. But, as we're talking about like learning and growing and things that you have learned along the way, is there something that you like, kind of like a general theme or general idea that you wish every rider knew about either horses or horse behavior or communicating with their horse, being the best for their horse, whatever that might be? Is there like a general theme that you just wish people knew as they either got into the industry or as they tried new things or as they grew as a rider?
Mm-hmm. Your horse is an expert observer. They're so good at detecting patterns and behavior and the way that you do things and the way that they report things back, because they're going to report it back using their body language. The way you're going to get that reflection of their thoughts is by what they're doing with their body. And so when you're working with your horse, if you can always give them the grace. So I say your horse is asking questions, because if you look at it like my horse is asking a question, can I eat the grass? Can I go back to the barn? Can I lope right now? Can I stop right now? Whatever is going on, if you can approach it with the idea that it's a question and not a blatant disobedience or something like that, then what happens is you'll become more curious about why your horse might be asking that question. And it will basically start to train you to become a pattern watcher. So an example of that, I just bought a yearling, I guess now 2-year-old technically, and I've had her now for 2 months. And this morning I had her out and I had her tied. I created tie stalls because at one point I was using a tie stall when we were traveling, and I realized how wonderful it is for teaching a lot of trailer loading issues, particularly issues with horses that want to rush backwards out of trailers. So we tie the horses in tie stalls a lot when they're cooling down or between work cycles. So I started tying her in that tie stall. And today when I went to untie her, I walked up to the front and I reached for the rope and she took one step forward. And the reason she took one step forward is because every day that I've been tying her in there, which let's say it's been 3 weeks and let's say it's been like 3 to 5 days a week that she's had like a session in there. In that, I know from experience that what horses tend to do is you lead them in, you tie them up. There's only one way out. It's backwards. This doesn't take a lot of thinking. It just takes repetition before they're like, they're going to walk up, they're going to untie me, we're going to go backwards. Well, pretty soon you walk up, they're going backwards before they're untied. This is your problem. So what happens if you walk up and you take hold of the rope and you ask them to take one step forward and then you untie? Well, it looks pointless for about 3 weeks until today. And today I walk up, I reach for the rope, she takes a step forward. Not initiated by me, initiated by her thinking and her observation of my pattern. This will be our saving grace in a horse trailer, which is one of the most dangerous places to tie a horse. Because it's like going in, if a horse starts to panic and go to, you're going up to untie them. And something that simple can literally change your entire relationship and safety with your horse. And it's just knowing that one step forward.
That's great advice. Especially that specific example, because I know many, many world champion trainers who have had trailering accidents because horses, like you said, it's one of the most dangerous places that you can tie a horse. And unfortunately, we have to tie them when we're putting them in the trailer. Kind of going off of what you were just talking about, and so we can wrap up, because I know you have other meetings that you have to get to with all of your students. And can you kind of leave us with a life lesson that you've learned from horses that's really stuck with you over the years?
I guess if I had to sum it up, it's going to be something along the lines of, if you deeply apply yourself to something, you're going to learn so much about yourself through doing it. And so I'm so grateful to horses, because I look at each one of them as my instructor also. So little Willow, who knows how to do sliding stops and who also has been shown successfully through 4th level in traditional dressage, she amazes me that when I come down center line, if I'm at the beginning of a test and I come down center line and I go to do a halt in traditional dressage, that if I sit up there and I execute it, she will halt with excellence, marking a 9 or a 10, because she's obediently doing what I trained her to do. And then at the end of that very same test, there's been so many times that I've come down through and my brain was tired at the end of the test and I was just reverting back and not thinking. And I come down through and I let my hips tip back and I do Rainer, and she does baby slide. And at this point, I'm wanting to know whether or not they actually train for this at the school, because they all write abrupt with slight loss of balance. And I'm like, that is like dressage term for slide, because over and over again. And I was consistently doing at the end of my tests because I'm tired. My focus is a little bit off. I'm like thankful to be done. Whatever was there, it would happen in the end halt because of me. But then I have to pause and go, how freaking amazing is it that this horse is just like, absolutely, sure, tell me what to do. Yep, I'm right there for you. And people doubt whether or not it's possible. It's like, I trained her, yet she's training me. It's amazing. It's just amazing. So if you love horses like I do and you deeply apply yourself to any level, literally just leading with excellence, tying with excellence, the better you head towards excellence in small things, you will learn more about yourself if you open yourself to that experience.
I love that. Yeah. What a great note to end this interview on. Thank you so much for your insight and answers. And I just think this is going to be very valuable for a wide array of people that are listening. And for our listeners that would like to either learn more about you or catch up with you or see what you're doing now, where can folks find you, like online or social media?
Mm-hmm. StacyWestfall.com is the most consistent place you'll find me. And then I have a YouTube channel where you can find like things like the video, like the Trail to the World show, and you can see different things that I've done like that. And then I jump in and out of other social medias, but my most consistent place is my website, StacyWestfall.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on here and talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Cosequin Joint Health Supplement. When performance matters, choose Cosequin.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com to see all the cool things that we're up to. And if you have any comments or questions, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys. And if you like what you're listening to, please be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.